I don't even know the years, but I want to say like 2010 or something like that, around that period. And I went off and I started my first startup, which was called Pluto, which was a travel insurance business. And we ran that for about 3 or so years before COVID. We built our own mobile app. It was kind of travel insurance for young people. And then COVID really just kind of beat us to pieces. And we tried to pivot through that with travel planning.
Why did you decide to build in this industry?
In travel insurance. I mean, I love to travel. Travel's a big part of my life. We felt there was a, classic consulting analysis, like there was a gap in insurance for young people because they don't buy it. The digital experience in travel insurance is really, really poor. I mean, insurance, it's in general really poor. So, again, that kind of consulting mind, you're like, there's an opportunity here.
Okay.
Little do we know.
Consulting job,
Yeah.
your own business.
Yeah, but then, that's when the consulting theory stops and you go into practice and you're like, okay,
How is it different from being in the corporate world to launching your own products? It's totally different? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it is very different because that safety net that you're so used to, the comfort just completely evaporates around you. Obviously, you've got to think about your own income stream, how you're going to pay yourself. And in the very, very early days of launching most businesses, you're probably not going to earn enough to pay yourself, let alone, a team for maybe 6 or 12 months, whatever that might be.
I think that is why so many people in the enterprise are thinking about building something, but they're afraid that it's not so comfortable, right?
Yeah, and that's why I think if I ever spoke to a founder who was about to make the jump that I did, I think more so now than ever with AI coding, with no-code tools, it's like you can do so much yourself. Five years ago, it's really hard to build a mobile app yourself. You'd have to get a team, and we got a team in the Ukraine, and we spent, £20,000 a month probably on, 3 or 4 developers.
Your own money or your
No, we raised some investment across the way, about $1.5 million. About over 3 or 4 years we ran the business, but you're spending 70, 80% of that on development. If we launched the same company today, it would be completely different. I could probably build all of that myself. Not to say that I'm so much better than I was 5 years ago, but the tools available are so different now than it was back then. So my advice to someone in my situation would probably be, run your thing on the side of your work for 6+ months, whatever that might be. Start getting in some money. Obviously that's not possible with every single use case, right? Every single industry, right? It might not be certainly possible, but I'd be really hard pressed to think of many examples where you can't get 1 or 2 clients signed up, a couple of $100 a month, a couple of $1,000 a month on your idea, prove that concept, do it in your evenings, do it in your weekend. If you can't get to that point in your evenings and your weekends, then I think you're going to find that jump really, really difficult, and you're going to be like, wow, what am I going to do? Like, I've got no proof of traction, I've got no income, all these other kinds of things. So yeah, I mean, your employer wouldn't like it, right? But run these things on the side. If you're thinking about leaving anyway, you're probably coasting, right? You can probably work 3 days a week, right, on your 5-day contract. So yeah, I would just do it like that.
By the way, how many of you are working for someone, for corporate? Quite a lot I have. The others are on their own, right? Building their own products. Okay, so let's jump into the product.
Yeah, halfway the jump.
Yeah. How do you go from 0 to thousands of users, right? The MyAskAI is one of the most successful apps built on Bubble, making a lot of revenue. How did you go from 0 to this moment?
Yeah, definitely not overnight. There are obviously a lot of kind of viral AI businesses that are coming up over the last couple of years, and you kind of look at a lot of them and you go, wow, it seems so simple, that idea. Why didn't I think of that? Or like, how are they able to just get thousands of new users every single week? And what I've learned, I think, over the last couple of years, not only with my own businesses, but when you really kind of study other people's successes, is none of this stuff happens overnight. It's extremely, extremely rare. And if it did happen overnight, it's not because anyone made any kind of smart or intelligent decision making. It's because of timing, and luck had like a huge component to that. And that's not to like slight those people in any way, but
success may come overnight, but before that you need months or years of preparation.
Yeah, you look at all these founders. You take Lovable, really interesting example, right? Hugely popular now AI coding tool, like Cursor and some of the others. They talk about this, whatever, 100 million ARR in the last kind of 6 months. But if you really track back on that business, they've been around for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, with GPT engineer, no
exactly.
one knows it, that it was.
They just kind of reframe the start point because it makes a great metric. But they have been through a really long grind to get to where they are right now. So yeah,
couple of launches, right? Relaunching,
yeah, exactly.
right? So Bubble
And I
is a
think
great example.
we've been through exactly the same journey, albeit we're not at 100 million ARR, so we haven't got to where they've got to. But in terms of the high level journey, it's like we've been at this for 3 or 4 years now, with multiple like small or significant pivots along the way, and we can talk about some of the details of like what that looked like. But
this is not your first product, right? You've launched the MyAskAI.
No, it's not. Yeah, we
also not
just started as a very generic kind of chat with your docs, style product, and that was all the fame back then. It was like upload a PDF and talk to it, and that was like mind blowing. A year and a half, 2 years ago, and then you could upload like your Google Drive, and that was just like a next level of thing for people. But we started to really hone in on customer support. We saw that's where our revenue was coming from when we really looked at all of our customers. We had loads of free customers, loads of like really kind of poor customers, you would say, like they're consuming a lot of time or resources from the business, but you're not really getting much from them, students, whatever, no offense to students, but that wasn't our use case. So we really started to hone in on customer support. And I think at every move, every 6, every 12 months, we're kind of going like this, getting narrower and narrower in our focus. And it's easy to understand the principles of like going after a super niche market from day one. That's like core 101 entrepreneur advice. It's very hard, I think, to do actually in practice because you bend the rules to suit yourself at the time. We've been continually going niche and niche to our use case of now kind of providing AI customer support on the customer support platform that you use through these integrations.
You've been earning money from day one. You were funding this from the money from clients, or you raised the money from VCs?
So in our first year, we actually kind of spun up a couple of smaller products. One of them was a kind of no-code model fine-tuning tool. You could upload a CSV and it would fine-tune a model. Everyone thought they wanted fine-tuned models back then. So we made a bit of revenue out of that. We were able to sell that actually on acquire.com for like $20,000 or something, which is great seed money. If it's just 2 of you, which it is, just me and my co-founder. What everyone really wanted to do was to chat with their docs. So we kind of started pivoting towards that. We kind of carved out a few of these parts of the business that we didn't really need anymore or wasn't our core focus, and we're able to kind of spin those off and sell them. So I think we sold 2 or 3 kind of tools or sub-businesses along the way. Maybe not a super applicable strategy.
Why did you go the VC route, looking for the money?
Yeah,
for funding?
I felt like I kind of tried that path with Pluto. We went down the fundraising route. It's insanely time consuming. If you're the person doing it, let's say you're the CEO, one of the founders who's responsible for fundraising, it's just like, it's almost half of your life, right? Half of your day to day. And it comes in periods, it's not like constant, but dealing with investors is a headache. Raising money is a real headache. It's stressful.
Pitching constantly.
Yeah.
For money, right?
Yeah, begging is probably the right word. And I just thought, today more than ever, again, with AI, with Bubble, when we came across that, we're just like, wow, like we could build up the product that we want ourselves, just the 2 of us. And then your overheads go from, needing to have $20,000, $30,000 a month to needing, just your salaries.
For living, right?
Exactly, just like core living costs. So that drastically changes it. So we felt like it was possible to do without raising money. And I think today, where we are right now, we're definitely not going to raise money because we just don't need to. But I think more than ever, the tide seems to be turning in general, but my advice would generally be, don't consider that as a first port of call. Obviously there are use cases where you need 6 months of quiet development with a lot of very sophisticated people that you don't have in your team and you need to pay them money, right? But I think again, in general, you can do it yourself. You can do it on your own dime, in your own time. And raising can create more problems than it can solve.
That's actually also my experience these days. And you can just build, right, instead of pitching, instead of going to VCs. Okay, so let's go to the technology part. Why Bubble? Because it's built on Bubble, right? Why you choose Bubble? Why did you choose Bubble?
Yeah, I mean, Bubble probably the most well-known no-coding tool out there. So when we started out on this, we were thinking, okay, we need to build a website, we need to build a web app. Obviously, I knew about things like Webflow and things like this, which are great for kind of marketing style pages or blog sites or content sites. But in terms of like having some real capability within your web application, to my experience before then, would be like, you have to code it. But then I can't remember how I first came across Bubble, but I was just like completely blown away by, I think I just, heard about it, jumped into the editor and just started having a play and was like, wow, I can build some like quite sophisticated front end stuff. And then I discovered the backend workflows, which back then was like a thing you had to turn on.
Yeah.
And it just like opened up this like crazy Pandora's box. I was like, wow, like you can build APIs in this and you can like, connect it all together and do some like really complex workflows. And we constantly keep thinking that we're going to come up against some feature, some piece of functionality, something we need to do that we're going to be like, yeah, we won't be able to do that in Bubble. And then we always just find a way through. And sometimes, we're hacking it and sometimes it is a little bit dirty, but like we've been very surprised with how much we've been able to achieve off Bubble. One example is in the early days of our product, we had a chat widget that you could put onto your site, a bit like Intercom or Chatbase or something like that. You click on the little logo, it opens up in your
widget, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then you're chatting to an AI agent. To think about creating an embeddable widget that sits on other people's sites and can sit on, hundreds of thousands of sites and be called every time the page loads, essentially. I was just like, there's no way we're going to be able to do this in Bubble. It's going to be so unperformant. It's going to be, how do we even get our Bubble scientists on it? All these kinds of things. But, we were able to find our way through. We hit massive scaling problems. Once we signed on some enterprises, that's when we moved over to the dedicator plan for a lot of much needed stability from Bubble. So we've been able to solve these things.
Can you share some numbers about the traffic, about the revenue you are getting right now?
Yeah, it's not so much traffic because our business is really now built on integrations with Intercom, with Zendesk, with Freshdesk. That's where 95% of our revenue comes from, customers that are using our integrations. So, we're talking about, tens of thousands of API calls a day kind of thing, or probably more.
Are those API calls going through Bubble?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for the most part. Revenue today is about $42,000 a month. So yeah, we're a subscription business, predominantly monthly, and we do a bit of annual and then some enterprise contracts on the side as well.
And the size of the team?
Just the two of us.
Just the two of us?
Yeah.
40,000 a
Yeah.
month. Pretty
It's
good.
good. Yeah, I mean, we're trying to. Thank you. And we
minus the fees for Bubble, right? Because you're right now on
Bubble's our biggest expense. Yeah.
You're right now on enterprise plan.
Yeah, and it's not cheap. It's not cheap,
and it's also not a very common case for the people using enterprise plan. Can you tell us a little more about moving from the SaaS plans to enterprise plan? When was the moment you decided you need to do this, and how the process went?
Yeah, I remember it quite well because Bubble are here, they're listening. They had a bad patch of reliability before we made the move. Worked out quite well for them because we ended up moving to enterprise. So they've ended up earning a lot more from us, but they had a really bad patch, outages here and there, sometimes 5-10 minutes, sometimes an hour. And this went on for a month or two. And there were a lot of posts from some of the founders on the forum at the time about why this was happening and stuff. But
it was around a year ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Moment, right?
Yeah, but for us and our customers, it's obviously completely unacceptable, because
they did this on purpose to move you to enterprise.
Maybe they moved. I'm sure a few people went over, because that was one of the solutions they suggested. Was like, why don't you consider enterprise? I was like, I can see that,
Great
but like,
point.
would also like some core reliability of the main platform. But if they've solved that, and I don't think they have those issues anymore for like the non-enterprise plans. That said, workload units started to come in. Like, we didn't build our product in a way that was like conscious of like how that billing was going to work. I'm still not a big fan of that billing method in general. I think it's super opaque. But again, moving for us gave us huge kind of predictability in our spend for how we do it. We could also kind of run the app how we wanted to do it. We're very API call heavy. Our platform is like basically listening to every message, every ping from Zendesk and Intercom from all our customers. Even if a lot of them aren't relevant, that's hundreds of thousands of pings a day. And
did you get any tech support from Bubble, how to set up the server, how to?
Yeah, we got a little bit of advice from them, and we work with an agency, Goodspeed, who I'll definitely shout out for any Bubble work. They're brilliant. They helped do some performance. There he is, Harish. Hey, man. Yeah. He did some great performance work for us, and we moved to dedicated. We brought our CPU down. He did a LinkedIn post on this recently, but he basically halved, if not more, our CPU usage. And again, if we were on a workload unit plan, we might have been spending more than enterprise, which is kind of like counterintuitive for how that pricing works, which again speaks to, I think, the problems they have with the workload unit pricing. But so it just made sense to us. We get stability, we get predictability on spend, and we now know, since all of our performance stuff has been done, we have a lot of headroom within our current one. So we don't really view ourselves having to spend more with Bubble. Again, if they're listening, sorry, you know, we're very good with where we are. We've got a lot of headroom to grow within that, and it's super stable. And yeah, we're in a good spot with it.
I think it's the best example that Bubble can scale, right?
Yeah, for sure.
In one of the interviews, you also mentioned that if you will be starting today with this type of product, you probably won't have this type of success because the market is overcrowded, right, with this type of product. So with no code, the time to market, it's even more important these days.
Yeah, definitely. I think if we launch today, I think it'd be really difficult. When we launched our initial kind of chat with your PDF, there were quite a few. We were one of the first. I think we managed to get some success from being one of the first. The people that were first have gone on and grown much, much faster. And we've seen that in so many different kind of product lines or different ideas where the first movers, you know, even OpenAI with ChatGPT, you know, they do penetrate and capture so much of the market just by being one of the first, and obviously having a good product experience and everything else that comes with that.
This crazy world with new things in AI popping every day, being first is maybe a super important thing.
I think so, and that's why we do still place a huge amount of value on no code, and we never really think about moving off it and kind of re-engineering the whole site in code. Could be done, I guess. I mean, it would be a really painful transition for sure, but the speed at which we're able to move on the front end and on the back end is, and 20% of our business is in code, and I do that side of it, and I'm working in Cursor. I'm using AI constantly for my coding, because again, I'm not like a software engineer by trade. But I still find myself thinking like I can do stuff so much quicker in Bubble, you know, even though it is still, you know, drag and drop, click, you know, select all these kinds of things as opposed to typing some things out. I'm sure that will change over time, but it's not always quicker, you know, to be on the coding thing. So yeah, we're going to be on Bubble for a while, I think. It helps us move fast.
We are 1 minute left, so I don't know if... I think that's all, right? So thank you very much. Thanks,
1
Alex.
minute left, one big takeaway for everyone in the audience here.
Just one takeaway, right?
Like one sentence, one line.
Quit your job. No, don't. I said don't do that. Start your thing on the side if you haven't already. You know, be brave, go and do it.